After MachineGames brought Wolfenstein back into the spotlight with the New Order, they doubled down with The Old Blood, a standalone expansion that serves as a prequel, expanding on B.J. Blazkowicz's story and exploring events prior to the first game in this new era of the franchise. Here, we revisit the iconic Castle Wolfenstein on a mission to uncover the whereabouts of General Death's Head. But the campaign extends beyond the castle's imposing walls. We also get to explore the village of Wolfburg, filled with hidden secrets and unexpected twists. All of this gives the game a vibe that feels like a throwback to the classic Return to Castle Wolfenstein, featuring a more medieval and even urban atmosphere. And because it's a prequel, it doesn't have to push the New Order's story forward, allowing it to focus entirely on its own self-contained narrative. So let's find out if The Old Blood is worth diving into, or if this trip down memory lane can be safely skipped. And just like in my review of the New Order, this video does have a section with spoilers, but I'll let you know in advance so you can jump straight to the conclusion if you want to avoid it. The Old Blood is set before the New Order and acts almost as a reimagining of Return to Castle Wolfenstein, with the first part of the game taking place inside the castle itself. And you arrive at the castle alongside your teammate Agent Wesley, aiming to infiltrate by posing as Nazi officers, but things quickly go south, and Blazkowicz soon reverts to the full-on exterminator mode we've come to expect. Unfortunately though, the duo is captured and imprisoned, and here we could adapt that old saying, don't judge a book by its cover. With The Old Blood, we might change that to don't judge a game by its first chapter. During the prison escape and your attempt to rescue Wesley, you're forced into a purely stealth-based approach for a chapter that drags on for what feels like an eternity, severely dragging down the game's initial pacing. Thankfully, after overcoming this test of patience, which undoubtedly caused many players to drop the game entirely, things finally pick up. The Old Blood then becomes what we expect from a modern Wolfenstein, a fast, frenetic, and brutal shooter. The objective here is to find a folder containing the location of General Death's Head compound, which sets the stage for that iconic opening assault in the New Order. And here we get new villains, essentially splitting the game into two parts, one featuring Major Jaeger and the other with Officer Helga. There are also new secondary characters who assist you during the campaign, but the focus is overwhelmingly on gameplay rather than a complex narrative. Cutscenes are used much more sparingly and are far less cinematic, with the perspective remaining exclusively first person. The game also manages to sprinkle in some lighter moments, like Blazkowicz's hilariously bad German, or a great bit where an ally tells him to control himself, and BJ pretends his radio is cutting out, misunderstanding the order as a command to eliminate as many enemies as he possibly can. The art direction remains excellent, mixing medieval and urban settings with environments that even evoke an Indiana Jones-style adventure in its caves. And while the scope is noticeably smaller, you won't be traveling to other countries or going on missions in a mini submarine here, the environmental variety is impressive, especially considering its shorter runtime, with a campaign you can wrap up in under 6 hours. And most importantly, The Old Blood successfully captures that core Wolfenstein essence, delivering a compact yet action-packed experience with a fantastic atmosphere, even if it stumbles with a slower, forcibly stealthy start. And being a project that's almost an expansion, developed on the same graphics engine and released just a year after the New Order, you can't really expect The Old Blood to radically overhaul the game's mechanics or progression system. Even so, despite the overall familiarity, The Old Blood does introduce a few new tricks. Blazkowicz now carries a pair of pipes in his arsenal. Separately, they can be used to scale certain walls, and when joined together, they transform into a lever to clear obstructions. And of course, since this is BJ we're talking about, these pipes also double as weapons, offering a fresh option for those stealthy takedowns. The arsenal remains quite similar to the New Order, with two main new additions. First up is a grenade launching pistol. It deals significant damage and offers more precision than traditional grenades, but you find its ammo is incredibly rare. Then there's a high caliber rifle, which can be used with or without its scope and deals heavy damage. However, with a pretty lengthy reload time, you need to be more tactical about when to use it. You can still find a sawed-off shotgun, which remains one of the most satisfying weapons in the game, absolutely devastating at close range, though it demands frequent reloads. Beyond that, you can wield heavy machine guns, both from fixed turrets and carried around. Add to this the rest of the familiar arsenal, the silenced pistol, the submachine gun, the conventional shotgun, with the option to dual-wield many of them, and the weapon variety feels robust. This keeps the gameplay consistently fun and challenging, especially in the more confined spaces inside the castle, in caves, and in the village streets of Wolfburg. The enemy roster is largely the same as in the New Order, but with a couple of notable newcomers. There's the super soldier, who needs to be connected to a power source and can be taken out stealthily by disabling its generator, which is pretty much the central theme of that first chapter. Thankfully, stealth isn't the only way to deal with them. And then you have the heavy soldiers. These brutes are immune to stealth, heavily armored and capable of dishing out serious damage up close. Fortunately, they're vulnerable to explosions thanks to the flammable tanks conveniently strapped to their backs. The combat itself continues to be excellent, with generous numbers of targets to mow down and powerful weapons at your disposal, while these new enemy types definitely spice things up with an extra layer of challenge. Once again, you have the option to kick things off with a stealthier approach, taking out commanders first to prevent them from calling in reinforcements, or you can just go in guns blazing at anything that moves. However, the AI still isn't the sharpest, and going in quietly to take out the commanders before switching to a more aggressive approach usually works best. Another familiar face in the Old Blood is the perk system. There are no experience points or traditional level ups here. Instead, you earn upgrades like increased max health, more ammo from pickups, and extra grenade capacity. The main difference is that, aside from the health and armor upgrades, there are no more branching skill trees, and the total number of perks is noticeably smaller, but the core mechanics work pretty much in the same way. In fact, some of the objectives are quite similar. Things like taking down enemies while using cover, getting kills while dual wielding, or stealthily eliminating commanders. The changes mostly tie into the new weapons, with perks designed to encourage you to use that grenade launching pistol, the high caliber rifle, and even Blasco's trusty pipes. The progression felt quite natural, and I managed to unlock almost all the upgrades during my first playthrough. The good news is that some of those more counterintuitive requirements from the New Order haven't made a comeback. Exploration also remains fairly linear, and collectibles are basically limited to ladders and gold pieces. And yes, you still have to manually pick up ammo, which brings along the same frustrations from the previous game. But since I came straight from the New Order and was already used to it, it didn't bother me quite as much this time around. Still, it remains a questionable design choice. Finally, one new addition that the Old Blood brings, likely due to its shorter overall experience, is the challenge mode. You unlock these during the campaign and can replay them later to aim for gold medals and some achievements. It's a smart way to bump up the playtime a bit without messing with the main story's plot or pacing, especially since, once again, there is no online mode here. This is a 100% single-player experience. To sum up, the Old Blood doesn't try to reinvent the wheel, but it definitely offers a fun experience, especially if you enjoyed the New Order. And now we'll head into spoiler territory, so if you still plan on playing the Old Blood and want to go in fresh, I highly recommend you skip straight to the conclusion. You can do that by jumping to the timestamp shown on the screen or by clicking on the chapter marker. Chapter 4 brings one of the high points of the campaign, leading to that inevitable confrontation with Major Jaeger as you get ambushed in a tavern. You're facing an absolute flood of enemies with no clear escape route, and the tension is amplified even further by having to protect two allies hiding out in the basement. It's only in the 5th chapter that we finally meet Helga, and once again Blazkowicz's attempt to pass himself off as German spectacularly fails. And this is where the plot takes a completely unexpected turn. Helga sees right through BJ's disguise, but before things can get any worse, an earthquake, triggered by an explosion in a nearby crypt, unleashes a mysterious substance that starts turning the Nazis into zombies. The sheer number of enemies ramps up significantly, and the game shifts into an almost horror-like vibe. This reaches its peak in the 8th chapter, where you start in a graveyard and push towards an excavation site, with only the full moonlight as your companion. Honestly, this was a surprise I genuinely wasn't expecting, but within the game's alternate history setting, it doesn't feel entirely out of place. It turns out to be the result of Helga's own investigation into a secret hidden by King Otto the Great. And this twist adds a whole new, pretty fun dimension to the Old Blood, effectively stopping it from feeling just like more of the same. Now, in terms of gameplay, the issue with enemies coming back as zombies is that it does tend to undermine stealth approaches in the campaign's final stretch. But then again, it also serves as a fresh challenge, forcing you to step outside your comfort zone. I do have to say I expected a bit more from the final boss. It ends up being a somewhat random feeling monster, and the fight is split into 3 very similar phases that don't really require you to switch up your strategy. And after you finally take down this beast, you get to dispose of another one, giving a definitive farewell to Helga. You secure the folder with the location of General Death's Head's compound and are then rescued by Fergus, tying things up with a direct lead into the beginning of the New Order. And even then, you can see Blazkowicz, quite understandably, wasn't feeling too confident about what was coming. So after our little tour through the corridors of Castle Wolfenstein and the back alleys of Wolfburg, let's get to our question. Should you play the Old Blood? Well, it's safe to say it stands as an excellent companion piece to the New Order. It doesn't revolutionize what came before, but it serves not only as a welcome extension for those craving more content, but also as a fantastic tribute to return to Castle Wolfenstein. And aside from that first chapter, which really does drag on much longer than it needed to, the Old Blood is packed with high adrenaline moments and some genuinely great surprises. The action is frenetic, the atmosphere remains oppressive, although with a more urban and medieval flavor, and the story, while not the main focus, effectively spans the Wolfenstein universe and neatly ties into the beginning of the New Order. It might not be an essential experience, and skipping it won't hurt your understanding of the New Order or the New Colossus, but with its fairly unique content and a tight little campaign that you can complete in about 6 hours, it's definitely worth your time. And that's even more so if you're a longtime fan of the franchise. In that case, then the Old Blood is a real treat. It's loaded with nods to previous games, and even a few Easter eggs referencing its younger brother and even Skyrim. The gameplay is fun, and the selection of weapons and enemies ensures a solid dose of challenge and variety. That said, a few aspects like the continued need to manually pick up every single item and the still not so sharp AI can leave a bit to be desired at times. But the bottom line is, if the New Order left you wanting more, or if you're looking to experience this new era of the franchise chronologically, The Old Blood is a great game that truly captures the Wolfenstein essence while still managing to sprinkle in some welcome new additions. And if you've made it this far into the video, come on now, just go ahead and subscribe to the channel. As always, thanks for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.